Charles's father, James I, once famously said, "No bishop, no king," referencing the connection between religious order and political order. Alterations in one implying alterations in the other. It was at the same time that the Scottish preacher Andrew Melville rebuked James, calling him God's silly vassal. The reformers thought monarchs were not to obstruct the progression of their religion, while the monarchs thought the reformers were a threat to their governance. The Church of England had an Episcopalian method of operation, meaning the church was governed by bishops, a method that mimicked Catholicism. While the anti-Episcopalians were the Presbyterians in Scotland and the Independents or Puritans in England. Led by its ministers and elders, Presbyterians were governed by elected officials that met in national assemblies. The Puritans were congregationalist in structure that is defined by few administrators except a pastor or preacher. The anti-hierarchical structure of the Puritans maximized the ideal of freedom of conscience. It was Charles's intrusion of the former structure that acted as a spark, but the kindling was laid from over a decade of Charles's contentious rule. When Charles's mother Anna died, her 18-year-old son accepted the offer from Lord Admiral Buckingham of mentorship. The 26-year-old Buckingham was a favorite of King James I and helped mediate a relationship between Prince Charles and his father. James condoned the mentorship and suggested to Charles to keep Buckingham as an aide when he were to be king. After Charles had been coronated and married, Buckingham was attacked by Parliament for his monopoly of power, mismanagement of foreign affairs, and for popish influences. His competence as Lord High Admiral was also questioned. The Spanish jeered, "Throw but a butt of sack and name for wine in the way of the English, it will do more harm in an English army than 1,000 Spaniards can do in arms." But in the end, Charles believed it was not Buckingham being attacked, but his right to appoint his own ministers. The famous painter Peter Paul Rubens was appalled by the Duke. "When I consider the caprice and arrogance of Buckingham, I pity that young king who, through false counsel, is needlessly throwing himself and his kingdom into such an extremity," Rubens remarked while painting this very portrait. When the royal chaplain Richard Montague published writings that defended the use of religious images in the Church of England, prominent Puritans demanded a conference with Charles's most influential advisor. Meeting twice at Buckingham's own residence in February 1626, the hopes were for a confirmation that the Church of England was in line with conservative Calvinism. However, Buckingham would not publicly denounce Montague's writings. Knowing Charles would be loyal to Buckingham's religious views, the mostly Puritan Parliament laid formal charges against Buckingham and began the impeachment process in May. Led by the religiously passionate John Pym, 13 offenses were listed, but before proceedings could gain traction, Charles dissolved Parliament on the 15th of June, 1626. Financial troubles forced Charles to convene Parliament months later, but after similar results again dissolved the body. This started the 11 years from 1629 to 1640, what is known as the personal rule of Charles I. Without recourse to Parliament, the king and his advisors used medieval laws to raise money. The most controversial was ship money, where coastal counties provided ships to the crown. Instead, this law was changed into a cash tax levied on all the counties, including those non-coastal. Another area that Charles used royal prerogative was for court. The Star Chamber was used to prosecute sedition, which became broadened to prosecute anybody who opposed royal policy. This was true even for opposing the practices of the Church of England, which became more and more Episcopalian with the appointment of Archbishop William Laud. Along with downplaying sermons, Laud advocated the holiness of sacrament, beautification of the Church, and an enhancement of the status of the clergy. There was much commotion when the communal altars were placed in the east of the church. Even referring to the communal table as an altar was considered too Roman by more than just a fringe. The writer Alexander Leighton denounced bishops as the trumpery of Antichrist, expressing a contemporary view that the Church of Rome was the whore of Babylon. In 1630, the Star Chamber sentenced him to have one ear cut off, his nose slit, and his face branded. In 1638, John Lilburne was sentenced to be whipped through the streets of London for circulating Puritan literature. The most infamous of these trials was that of three Puritan pamphleteers, William Prine, Henry Burton, and John Bastwick. They accused Archbishop Laud of introducing innovations to prepare the way for popery. Bastwick, for example, wrote that the substance of religion is thrust out, and that the church is now full of ceremonies as a dog is full of fleas. In June 1637, all three were brought before the Star Chamber and charged with libel. They were convicted, imprisoned for life, and condemned to have their ears cropped. Prine was also sentenced to be branded on each cheek with the letter SL, meaning seditious libeler, but which he claimed stood for Scars of Laud. Charles sought to bring religion in his three kingdoms to uniformity. In 1637, the king ordered all Scottish churches to use the Book of Common Prayer. Called Laud's Liturgy, the reception by the Presbyterian Scots was violent. In Edinburgh, Jenny Ged screamed, "Villain, dost thou say mass at my ear?" She then threw her stool at the minister and a riot ensued. A destructive mob ransacked the church, cursing, "A pope, down with him!" After this event, the Bishop of Brecon had to minister while pointing loaded pistols at the congregation. The people of Scotland protested by signing a declaration against changes to their Presbyterianism. Called the National Covenant, Charles saw this patriotic and religious fervor as rebellion and decided to reassert his authority by force.